My white friend used me as his diversity, hired to save his company. So I exposed his scheme and burned him to the ground. 2 years later, he saw me at the airport and couldn't even look me in the eye. Being the only black guy in my white friend group, I thought I was safe. People all over my town called me the N-word, but I had built a thicker skin, so I didn't care. It got to me sometimes because people in gym class would pretend to whip me with their towels as if I was their slave, but just to protect myself, I ruled it as them joking. But as we all got older, everyone realized the jokes were immature, and some even apologized, but I told them not to worry about it. Everything was cool in college, up until I met Trent during orientation. The first thing he said to me was, "My God, look at that hair. It's as soft as cotton. You pick it yourself?" But I didn't laugh, just glared at him. So he took the hint and stopped. Until a couple nights later, when we found ourselves at a frat party. We were standing beside a group of attractive girls when his jokes re-emerged. I always tell this one, pointing to me. It's amazing how his ancestors used to be out on the fields. Meanwhile, he's just partying his head off. I looked down at the ground. I didn't want to interrupt the laughter with confrontation, so I just let it slide. But once Trent figured out how to get girls' attention, he wasn't backing down. The entire night ended up as me just being the butt of every escalating joke. And by the time we were leaving, he was straight up referring to me as the N-word with the hard R. So when we were in the Uber back to my dorm, I fed him water and bread. Also, he could sober up. As soon as the Uber drove away, I swung at him. His lanky self stumbled backwards, and he had a fake surprised look plastered on his face. I told him if he ever tried anything like that again, we'd never speak again. He apologized and blamed it on the alcohol. And I guess his bruised face made me feel bad, because I ended up forgiving him. Even with what happened next, I still don't regret it, because I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Anyway, a few months later, his cousin was getting married. He invited me, but under one condition. I couldn't wear my cultural attire because it might scare the groom's parents. An awful gut feeling washed over me, and I even felt myself cringe a little bit. But still, I agreed, because after all, it was their day, not mine. Me and Trent ended up wearing matching suits, and I was looking forward to it because it was my first wedding. The ceremony was beautiful, and it even made me feel a little lovesick. Then came the banquet. I couldn't find Trent anywhere, and he had been in the bathroom for almost an hour. I chuckled to myself, thinking that he probably just drank too much champagne, and proceeded to eat without him. But then, 10 minutes later, he came stumbling in. I almost vomited. His face was covered in what looked like black eyeliner, and his lips were all puffy. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, ketchup! He then proceeded to actually say the N-word, again with the hard R. I stormed out of the room. The last thing I heard was some hammered chuckling. Tears filled my eyes as I blocked him on everything, with no intention of speaking to him again. The rest of my college life was uphill after that. To my surprise, Trent was an exception. Turns out not everyone is a prejudiced piece of crap, and I actually made some real friends. And I never heard from him again, until a year after graduating. Somehow, he had gotten a hold of my email. In it, he sent 3 photos of him doing volunteer work in Nigeria, my hometown. He then sent a very long paragraph about how much he had changed, and how sorry he was. I didn't believe it, not for one bit, but I was impressed by his volunteer work, and his family had really great connections. So I agreed to meet him for dinner. His gait was confident, he smelled good, very put together. He apologized profusely, and told me that his parents had raised him on that type of humor. But he has since cut ties and gone NC, and he is disgusted with his past behavior. As I looked into his eyes, I swear I saw a look of genuineness. So I accepted, and we caught up a few more times after that. It was on the 4th time that he asked for a favor. He asked if I could come into his company and help them with an issue in the accounting department. I was an accountant. He promised to pay me $1,000 for my time, so I instantly agreed. It was a no-brainer. His company was just outside of Maine in New Hampshire, so it wasn't too far either. When we arrived, a wave of culture shock hit my body. Literally everyone was white. The secretaries, doormen, lawyers, everyone. I tried to shrug it off, but it was hard as they all stared at me with unbreaking eye contact. I ended up being there for the week, and at the end I sat in on a quarterly executive meeting. Nothing fancy, just some high-level discussion since I'd been helping. Midway through, one of the executives remarked that they had been relieved of the flag for zero visible diversity. Everyone patted me on the back. My blood went cold. That's why I was there. I thought back to all the jokes Trent made, all the times he used my race as social currency, all the times he called me darky, and at that moment I just laughed. But behind my smile was something else, something more disturbing, because if he thought he could use me as his diversity token without consequences, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The parking garage felt like a tomb as I walked to my car, my footsteps echoing off concrete walls. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out my phone to text Maya about extending my stay in New Hampshire. The screen's glow illuminated my face in the darkness while I typed out the lie about this being a great opportunity. Behind me, I heard Trent's expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. He approached with a champagne bottle in hand, that same confident gait from our dinner meetings. The bottle's gold foil caught the fluorescent lights as he raised it in mock celebration. I forced myself to turn around slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Trent popped the cork with practiced ease, foam spilling over his manicured hands like guilt he'd never acknowledge. He poured 2 glasses he'd somehow produced from his briefcase, handing me one with that politician's smile. The champagne tasted expensive and bitter. Trent clinked his glass against mine, thanking me for playing along so perfectly. His words came out smooth, rehearsed. Then he mentioned doubling my fee to $2,000, pulling out his phone to make the transfer right there. As he swiped through his photos to find his banking app, I caught glimpses of his Nigeria pictures, the same ones he'd sent me. Something felt off about them now. The lighting, the backgrounds, the perfectly staged moments of him surrounded by smiling children. He noticed me looking and quickly swiped past, but not before I saw the location tag on one photo. Serengeti Luxury Safari Resort. My stomach turned. Those volunteer photos were from a vacation, an expensive African safari repackaged as humanitarian work. The champagne foam on his hands suddenly looked like spilled lies, and I had to stop myself from throwing my glass at his face. Instead, I smiled, accepted the doubled payment, watched the notification pop up on my phone confirming the transfer. Trent's shoulders relaxed, mistaking my silence for compliance. He started scrolling through his phone again, this time showing me something else entirely. Screenshots. Our entire text conversation from the past month, carefully documented. Every message where I'd agreed to help, every confirmation of payment, every friendly exchange. He'd been building a paper trail. The parking garage suddenly felt smaller. Trent explained casually how he'd already shared these with HR, proving our renewed friendship, proving I was here willingly, proving he wasn't exploiting anyone. I nodded, still smiling, and excused myself to my rental car. Once inside, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Trent stride back to the building, probably to report his success to the executives. The hotel lobby was nearly empty when I returned. The young black woman at the reception desk, whose name tag read Keisha, gave me a knowing look as I approached. She glanced around, ensuring no one else was within earshot, then leaned forward slightly. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She'd overheard some executives at the hotel bar last week discussing their diversity metrics. This wasn't their first time. There had been others. Minorities brought in for exactly 1 week, just long enough to photograph for reports and websites. I thanked her quietly and headed to my room, mind racing. Inside, I called my actual job, telling my boss I needed to extend my personal time. His confusion was evident through the phone. I hadn't mentioned any side consulting work. I made up something about a family emergency, hating the lie but needing the time. My phone buzzed. Maya's response to my earlier text came through, her concern evident even in typed words. She asked if everything was really okay, mentioned she'd been looking forward to our weekend plans. I typed back that this was an incredible opportunity, that I'd explain everything when I got back. Another lie. The distance I was creating felt necessary but wrong. Sleep wouldn't come. At 2 a.m., I opened LinkedIn on my laptop. My network included several black professionals from various industries. As I scrolled through my connections, I noticed something strange. Multiple posts from the past week, all mentioning suspicious connection requests from someone at Trent's company. screenshots showed connection invitations being withdrawn after they'd responded with questions about the nature of the opportunity. The name on those invitations, Trent. I started taking my own screenshots, documenting the pattern. My cursor hovered over Trent's profile as I captured image after image. Then I clicked to view his full profile, forgetting about LinkedIn's notification system. The blue checkmark appeared immediately. Trent Williams viewed your profile. My phone rang within minutes. Trent's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, but he didn't leave a message. Instead, a text came through asking if I was having trouble sleeping, if I needed anything. The subtext was clear. He knew I was investigating. Morning came too quickly. I showered and dressed in my best suit, preparing for another day of being displayed. Downstairs, Keisha was still on shift, looking tired. She nodded as I passed, a silent acknowledgement of our shared understanding. Trent was already in the office when I arrived, chatting with a group of junior employees near the coffee machine. His voice carried as he explained how I was helping with diversity initiatives, how we'd reconnected after college and rebuilt our friendship. The narrative he was creating made me complicit, a willing participant in his scheme. My phone buzzed. Derek, my old college roommate, had sent a text. Word was spreading through our alumni network about my work with Trent. Derek's message was blunt, asking if I was really selling out by helping the same guy who'd humiliated me for years. I couldn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I made my way to the accounting department, where I was supposedly consulting. The work was straightforward, basic process improvements any competent accountant could identify. But that wasn't why I was here. During my lunch break, I explored the company intranet from a spare workstation. Hidden in the HR section, I found what Keisha had hinted at. Consultant profiles, all minorities, all contracted for exactly 1 week. Each profile ended with the same phrase. Contract completed successfully. The dates showed a clear pattern. One per quarter, just enough to maintain their metrics. A nervous cough behind me made me turn. Beth, Trent's assistant, stood there wringing her hands. She'd been friendly yesterday, bringing me coffee and making small talk. Now she could barely make eye contact, mumbling something about needing the workstation before hurrying away. The afternoon dragged on. Trent had scheduled me for meetings with different departments, controlling my time and limiting my ability to investigate further. Each meeting followed the same script. Executives would thank me for my insights, mention how valuable my perspective was, take photos for their internal newsletters. By evening, I was exhausted from performing. Back at the hotel, I found Maya had called 3 times. When I finally called back, her voice was strained. Trent had messaged her on Instagram, talking about planning some surprise for me. He was inserting himself into my personal life, creating more evidence of our friendship. I scrolled through my old college group chat, which had been dormant for months. New messages appeared. Trent had posted photos from his cousin's wedding, the same event where he'd shown up in blackface. But these photos were edited, cropped, his face clean, just 2 friends in matching suits. The timestamp showed he'd uploaded them today. The next morning brought new challenges. Trent had scheduled me for diversity workshops with 3 different departments. My calendar was blocked solid, preventing any free time. During a brief bathroom break, I checked my work email. My manager had sent a concerned message about a promotion opportunity I was missing by being away. At lunch, I escaped to a local coffee shop. The owner, an older white man, greeted me like a regular. He assumed I worked for Trent full-time, mentioned something about the last consultant who'd left town quickly. When I pressed for details, his face closed off. He suddenly needed to check something in the back. Returning to the office, I found Beth eating alone in the break room. I sat nearby, noticing she was struggling with some spreadsheets. Accounting homework, she explained when I offered to help. As I walked her through the problems, she relaxed slightly. Mentioned she was Trent's cousin, trying to finish her degree while working. We talked for the full lunch hour. Beth opened up about the family dynamics, how Trent had always been the golden child. Almost as an afterthought, she mentioned his filing system, how he kept detailed records on all the diversity hires in a locked drawer in his office. She caught herself, face flushing as she realized what she'd revealed. I memorized the lock brand she'd inadvertently mentioned while gesturing, filed the information away, thanked her for the conversation, and returned to my assigned meetings. Throughout the afternoon, 3 different junior employees approached me separately. Each mentioned feeling uncomfortable with what they called the company's diversity theater. Each used the exact same phrase, just playing the game. The script was showing. During my meeting with Trent to review the day, I noticed his jewelry. Today, he wore an African-themed bracelet and necklace, items I hadn't seen during our dinners. The kind of accessories that screamed cultural appreciation to those who didn't know better. I wondered if he had a separate collection for meeting with executives. That evening, Keisha was waiting in the hotel lobby. She introduced me to her brother Marcus, who'd been last year's consultant. He looked tired, older than his years. Over coffee in a corner booth, he told his story. 1 week of being paraded around, then threats when he tried to speak up. Trent had connections, had threatened to call Marcus's employer with stories about unprofessional behavior. Marcus had left quietly, signed nothing, but lived with the fear. He showed me emails, saved screenshots, evidence he'd been too scared to use. The pattern was clear and devastating. Back in my room, I called Derek, told him to spread word in our alumni network about my amazing opportunity with Trent. Let him think I was bragging. The seeds of reputation damage needed to be planted carefully. The next day, Trent tried to schedule me for a professional photo shoot. The company needed updated diversity materials for their website, but Beth had accidentally double-booked the photographer with a conflicting executive meeting. She apologized profusely to Trent, who barely contained his irritation. Instead, I spent the morning in more meetings, building relationships with employees who were starting to see me as more than just a prop. My competence was showing through, making some executives forget why I was really there. After lunch, the CFO pulled me aside. They needed me at tomorrow's board meeting. Nothing formal, just stand there and look professional while they discussed quarterly metrics. The casual way he said it, like I was a piece of furniture to be positioned, made my skin crawl. That night, I sat in my hotel room surrounded by screenshots, notes, and evidence. Trent's LinkedIn post appeared the next morning while I was still in bed. My phone buzzed with notifications as mutual connections reacted to his carefully crafted narrative about our renewed friendship and healing racial divides. The post featured my professional headshot, lifted from my company website without permission, positioned next to his smiling face. He tagged my employer, ensuring maximum visibility. I sat up, scrolling through the comments. Former classmates praised his growth. Business connections applauded his commitment to diversity. Each reaction felt like another bar in the cage he was building around me. The love bombing pattern was textbook manipulation, and I recognized it from articles I'd read about psychological control tactics. My laptop became my documentation center. I created folders for screenshots, emails, and notes. Every interaction, every suspicious detail, every pattern I noticed went into the files. The methodical process helped calm the rage simmering beneath my professional exterior. Keisha's brother Marcus called while I was organizing evidence. His voice carried the weight of unspoken threats as he described Trent's methods. After Marcus had tried to speak up about being used as a diversity prop, Trent had called his employer with fabricated stories about unprofessional behavior during his consulting week. The accusations were vague enough to avoid legal action, but specific enough to damage Marcus's reputation. He'd been passed over for 2 promotions since then. The warning was clear. Trent didn't just exploit people, he destroyed those who resisted. At the office, Beth avoided making eye contact when I passed her desk. Later, I overheard Trent instructing her to post about the company's diversity success on her social media. She mumbled something about not using Instagram anymore, her fingers nervously tapping her keyboard. The small act of resistance didn't go unnoticed by Trent, whose jaw tightened before he walked away. The board meeting preparation consumed my afternoon. Trent coached me on exactly what to say if asked any questions, his instructions precise and controlling. I activated my phone's voice memo app, slipping it into my pocket to record his directions. His words painted a clear picture of orchestrated deception. During a break, I approached HR with a hypothetical question about tokenism and consultant protections. The HR manager's dismissive response confirmed what I'd suspected. As contractors, we had no real recourse. The company's policies protected them, not us. 3 employees joined me for lunch lunch without invitation. They'd been watching, waiting for someone to acknowledge what everyone could see but no one would name. They shared stories about how Trent's behavior poisoned the workplace culture, how his manipulation tactics extended beyond diversity initiatives. The company's morale was suffering, but fear kept people silent. That evening, I discovered Trent's parents' Facebook profiles. Their vacation photos told a different story than the one Trent had sold me. Monthly trips together, family dinners, shared investments. The estrangement he'd claimed to seem more progressive was another fabrication. Beth had mentioned this in passing, but seeing the evidence made it real. A message from a former college classmate revealed another piece of the puzzle. Trent had pulled a similar scheme at his previous company, but that consultant had signed an NDA. The pattern stretched back years, refined and perfected with each victim. I continued attending meetings, maintaining my professional demeanor while building genuine relationships with employees. My actual competence in accounting began to shine through, making some executives forget I was supposed to be just a prop. They started asking real questions, seeking my input on legitimate business matters. Trent noticed the shift. His control was slipping. He set a new deadline, informing me I needed to recruit 3 more black professionals for the next quarter's metrics. The desperation in his voice was barely concealed beneath his usual smooth delivery. Marcus agreed to share his full experience if I could guarantee Trent wouldn't retaliate against his current job. The promise felt heavy, knowing I couldn't truly protect him, but his story needed to be heard. Over drinks one evening, Trent's carefully maintained facade cracked. The alcohol loosened his tongue, and he admitted he'd learned this game from his father, who'd done the same thing throughout the 90s. It was a family tradition of exploitation, passed down like a poisoned inheritance. The next morning brought an unexpected offer. Trent dangled a permanent position as director of diversity with a 6-figure salary. The number was life-changing money for someone like me. I asked for time to consider, watching his confidence surge at my apparent interest. Beth and 2 other employees separately pulled me aside, asking if I was really considering the position. Their disappointment was palpable, though they tried to hide it. They'd begun to see me as someone who might finally expose the truth. My investigation deepened when I discovered Trent's Nigeria volunteer photos were staged at the Serengeti Luxury Safari Resort. The resort's blog featured identical locations marketed as authentic African experiences. A reverse image search confirmed my suspicions. Every photo was from his vacation, carefully edited to appear humanitarian. The scope of support for Trent's scheme was smaller than it appeared. Only 5 executives truly endorsed his methods. The rest simply went along to avoid conflict, trapped in their own web of complicity. Beth's trust in me grew after Trent publicly berated her for a minor mistake. She revealed she'd had a spare key to his office since helping with setup months ago. Her hands shook as she explained she'd been too scared to use it but trusted me now. The files were accessible. Maya's unexpected arrival disrupted my isolation. She'd flown out despite my protests, refusing to let me face this alone. She brought my favorite Nigerian meal, the familiar spices grounding me in my identity. Over dinner, her presence reminded me I wasn't responsible for fixing Trent or the company. My only obligation was to the truth. I decided to document everything without breaking any laws or tampering with evidence. The high road was harder but necessary. Confronting Trent privately about the safari photos, I watched him scramble for explanations. His stories contradicted each other, sweat stains spreading across his expensive shirt like guilt made visible. The polished exterior was cracking. Marcus and 2 other former consultants agreed to speak on record about their experiences. Their courage inspired my own determination. Beth's decision to tell her mother, Trent's aunt, about his behavior created family friction. Sunday dinner became a battlefield, with relatives questioning Trent's methods for the first time. The shift in company culture was gradual but noticeable. Junior employees started openly questioning diversity metrics in team meetings. Trent's prepared answers fell flat, his usual charm failing to mask the hollow initiatives. The local Black Professionals Network, alerted by my careful communications, began warning members about the company. Trent's pool of potential victims was drying up. In a moment of desperation, Trent admitted he needed this scheme to work. His trust fund required him to maintain an executive position until age 35. Without it, his carefully constructed life would crumble. Department heads began approaching me privately to apologize for their complicity. Each claimed they didn't realize the full extent of the exploitation, though their excuses rang hollow. Trent's options narrowed as employees increasingly refused to participate in his diversity theater. His attempts to schedule new initiatives met with budget constraints and scheduling conflicts, all conveniently preventing further exploitation. The CFO witnessed Trent screaming at me for not playing the game right. The outburst, captured on security cameras, finally opened his eyes to the truth. The executive who'd casually asked me to stand like furniture during board meetings now saw the human cost of their metrics. My alumni network quietly spread word about Trent's true nature. His LinkedIn connections dropped daily, each lost contact representing another closed door in his professional future. Beth's photocopied employment records made weeks earlier during routine filing corroborated all the former consultants' statements. She hadn't known their significance at the time, but her meticulous record-keeping now provided crucial evidence. The board meeting loomed. Trent's text that night was terse, a simple warning not to mess things up. The threat was implicit but clear. During pre-meeting preparation, executives witnessed Trent's mask slip completely when he called me ungrateful for not appreciating the opportunity he'd given me. The word choice revealed his true perspective. I wasn't a colleague or even a person to him, just a tool that wasn't functioning properly. The comfortable life Trent's payoff could provide tempted me. The money would solve many problems, create opportunities I'd never have otherwise, but accepting it meant becoming complicit in the exploitation of others who would come after me. I chose to maintain my professional demeanor, letting Trent's paranoia destroy him from within. Competence became my weapon, excellence my revenge. Every successful interaction with executives, every valuable contribution I made, highlighted the waste of using qualified professionals as mere props. Board members began expressing private discomfort with Trent's diversity strategy. The questions they asked revealed growing awareness of the scheme's ethical problems. Truth spread organically through the company as employees shared their observations. No grand revelation was needed. The facts spoke for themselves when people finally felt safe to acknowledge them. Trent's father's attempt to reach me through the hotel's front desk backfired spectacularly. Keisha played the recorded message for me, his demanding tone and reference to honoring the agreement, accidentally confirming everything on a recorded line. Desperation drove Trent to triple his offer. He promised recommendation letters, networking connections, whatever it took to buy my silence. I forwarded his bribe attempt to my growing support network, exposing his crumbling control. The trust fund manager, alerted by family drama and whispers of impropriety, froze Trent's access pending investigation. His wealth vanished overnight, leaving him scrambling to maintain his lifestyle. Maya's presence throughout this ordeal deepened our relationship. She watched me choose integrity over easy money, seeing the person I truly was rather than the token Trent tried to make me. Unexpected support emerged from white employees who'd been pressured to stay silent about discriminatory practices they'd witnessed. The victims extended beyond minorities to anyone with a conscience who'd been forced to participate in the charade. I compiled a comprehensive timeline showing the pattern of exploitation, presenting it to key stakeholders. Facts created an undeniable narrative that no amount of smooth talking could refute. The board called an emergency session without Trent present to discuss diversity concerns. The very metrics he'd manipulated to show success now revealed the depth of his deception. As I prepared my final documentation, I realized this wasn't just about exposing Trent. It was about breaking a generational cycle of exploitation, creating consequences for actions that had gone unchecked for decades. The champagne foam had long since dried, but the stain of his deception was about to be scrubbed clean. Beth's testimony before the board hit harder than anyone expected. She brought photocopies of Trent's files, each folder meticulously labeled with names and dates. Her hands trembled as she laid them out on the conference table, but her voice remained steady. The board members leaned forward, examining the evidence of systematic systematic exploitation spanning years. The company's own documentation condemned them. Their diversity metrics showed the same pattern repeating quarterly. 1 week consultants, always minorities, always leaving without explanation. The CFO's face grew pale as he recognized his signature on approval forms he'd never truly examined. I sent my comprehensive report to all board members simultaneously, copying my lawyer friend from college for protection. The email contained everything: screenshots, recordings, testimonies from Marcus and other former consultants. The timestamp showed 3:47 p.m. By 3:52 p.m., my phone was vibrating with calls from executives. Board members voted to launch a full investigation into Trent's department. The decision came swiftly, their legal counsel advising immediate action to limit liability. Trent's career trajectory effectively ended in that moment, though he didn't know it yet. That evening, Trent's LinkedIn activity exploded. He posted a fabricated story about my supposed criminal past, tagging major accounting firms and industry leaders. The accusations were wild: embezzlement, fraud, things easily disproven but damaging in the moment. His desperation made him sloppy. He'd forgotten that LinkedIn tracks edit history, and his multiple revisions to make the story more inflammatory were all preserved. My actual employer called within hours. Their tone was concerned but cautious as they asked about Trent's accusations. I explained the situation calmly, forwarding them my documentation. The conversation ended with their assurance of support, but I could hear the uncertainty. Even false accusations leave marks. Some supporters began distancing themselves. Former colleagues who'd initially praised my courage now worried about association with a brewing scandal. Their LinkedIn connections quietly disappeared. Text messages went unanswered. The price of truth was becoming clear. I focused on defending myself without appearing vindictive. Each response to inquiries was measured, factual, accompanied by evidence. The high road felt increasingly lonely as Trent's attacks escalated, but I maintained my professional demeanor. The decision to release documentation publicly weighed heavily. Social media would amplify the story but might paint me as seeking attention. Instead, I chose strategic distribution through professional networks, accounting associations, diversity advocacy groups, business ethics forums, people who could create real change rather than just viral moments. The board meeting to determine Trent's fate arrived on a gray Thursday morning. I attended as a witness, sitting in the back row of the conference room. Trent's parents occupied seats near the front, their expensive clothes and rigid postures broadcasting old money privilege. Trent's defense was predictable. He claimed I'd orchestrated everything for money, that I'd manipulated him into offering the consulting position. But the timeline destroyed his narrative. Emails showed he'd initiated contact. The LinkedIn posts about other black professionals predated my involvement. His own documentation worked against him. His father's interruption changed everything. Standing to defend his son, he accidentally revealed the family pattern. He mentioned how they'd handled similar situations at 3 previous companies over 2 decades, always managing to quiet things down. The board members exchanged glances. Their legal counsel frantically scribbled notes. Beth produced one final piece of evidence: her grandfather's will. She discovered it while helping her mother sort through family papers. The document clearly stated that any family member terminated for discriminatory practices would forfeit their inheritance. Trent's trust fund had always been conditional, and his family had known his weakness. The moment of decision arrived. Settlement offers were discussed. A substantial sum with an NDA attached, enough to ensure my silence and comfort. The number they proposed could pay off student loans, provide a house down payment, secure my future. All I had to do was sign and disappear. I pushed the contract back across the table unsigned. The choice meant a longer road to justice, more difficult battles ahead, but freedom from their constraints. Some board members looked relieved. Others seemed disappointed. Trent's face went white. The vote was unanimous. Trent's termination was effective immediately. The family trustees, alerted to the will's provisions and the board's decision, revoked his trust fund access permanently. Generational wealth evaporated in minutes. Trent's final attempt at deflection fell flat. He ranted about cancel culture, about oversensitivity, about political correctness destroying business. But the evidence was too clear, too documented, too systematic. His words sounded hollow even to those who might have once agreed. His threats about ruining my career proved empty. Truth spread faster than his lies. Professional networks had already seen the documentation. His credibility was shattered. Former victims began speaking openly, emboldened by the board's action.